Welcome back to my YouTube channel. When the VP's assistant called an all-staff meeting, effective immediately, I thought it was just another surprise briefing. But the moment I stepped into the boardroom, the tension hit me like static before a storm. Every face looked uneasy, and in the center stood her, the VP's daughter, Madison, arms crossed, chin lifted like she owned the place. The VP's voice sliced through the murmurs. "Everyone, this will be quick," he announced. Then he turned his glare toward me. "Apologize to my daughter now, or you're fired." The room froze. I could hear my own heartbeat. I should have been scared. I should have apologized just to keep my job. But when you've spent nights crying yourself to sleep after being falsely accused, something in you changes. You stop fearing titles and start standing for truth. 2 weeks ago, Madison had joined our department as a junior consultant. Everyone knew it was nepotism at its finest. I didn't mind until she started crossing lines. She took credit for my project notes, spread rumors that I'd sabotaged her files, and when I finally confronted her privately, she smirked and said, "No one's going to believe you over me." She was right, until today. I looked straight at the VP. "With all due respect, sir," I said, my voice steady, "you might want to see something first." I walked to the conference screen, plugged in my phone, and hit play. The footage rolled. The boardroom's hum turned into silence. It was the video from the security camera in the conference room. The same night Madison had deleted my presentation and replaced it with hers. You could see her clearly, laughing, saying, "Now let's see how she explains this in front of everyone tomorrow." The silence grew heavier. Madison's confident smirk melted. Even the CEO sitting in the corner slowly turned to the VP. His face said everything words couldn't. When the video ended, I unplugged my phone and looked up. "I'll apologize," I said quietly, "if that's still what you want." The VP opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't look at me. The CEO stood. "Meeting adjourned," he said. "Madison, clear your desk." Effective immediately. When the VP's assistant called an all-staff meeting, effective immediately, my stomach tightened. It wasn't like him to sound that serious, especially on a Friday morning when most of us were already halfway checked out, dreaming of weekend plans. The office buzzed with whispers as people gathered their laptops and coffee cups, exchanging uneasy glances. I caught snippets. Is it about the quarterly numbers? Did the merger fall through? Why does Madison look so smug? The boardroom was colder than usual, both in temperature and mood. The blinds were drawn, and the long mahogany table gleamed under the harsh lights. Every executive, manager, and intern sat in stiff silence. I took a seat near the end, the last empty chair in the corner, trying to read the tension that seemed to pulse through the air like an electric current. Then he walked in, the VP himself. Usually calm, commanding, the kind of man who could control a room with just a look. But today, his eyes burned with something different. Anger, pride, defensiveness. And right behind him, in that perfectly tailored beige dress, was his daughter, Madison. Her expression smug, her chin tilted high as if she were entering a runway instead of a meeting. She didn't belong here. Not really. Everyone knew it. She was a recent hire with no real experience, but being the VP's daughter came with its perks. People smiled at her jokes even when they weren't funny. They complimented her half-done work and pretended not to notice when she borrowed other people's ideas. I used to think it was harmless, office politics at its most predictable. But something about today felt different. The VP didn't waste a second. He stepped forward, his voice sharp enough to cut through the air. "Everyone, this will be quick," he said, his tone more command than announcement. His gaze swept across the table before landing squarely on me. "Apologize to my daughter now, or you're fired." A murmur rippled through the room. My pulse quickened. My hands went cold. I could feel a dozen eyes turning toward me, waiting to see what I would do. My first instinct was disbelief. Surely this was some kind of misunderstanding. But the look on Madison's face told me it wasn't. She was enjoying this. Her lips twitched into a slight smirk, her eyes glinting with the satisfaction of someone who had finally set the perfect trap. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I looked at the VP, a man who had praised my work just 2 weeks ago, who once called me one of the sharpest analysts on the team. Now he stood before everyone, his authority pressing down like a weight, demanding humiliation from me in front of the entire staff. The silence stretched. Even the hum of the AC seemed to fade. I could hear the faint sound of someone's pen tapping nervously against the table. A few people shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. No one dared to speak. In that moment, I realized something. Fear wasn't the same as weakness. My voice might have been quiet, but my resolve wasn't. I wasn't about to apologize for something I didn't do. Not to Madison, not to her father, not to anyone. I sat up straighter, my hands clasped in my lap to stop their trembling. The urge to cry or shout or storm out was strong, but stronger than all of that was a quiet certainty that this moment wasn't the end of something, it was the beginning. I didn't know exactly how, but I knew the truth was about to come to light. I had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it. And though the room didn't know it yet, the story wasn't going to end the way Madison planned. 2 weeks earlier, the office had been its usual chaos of overlapping deadlines, caffeine highs, and whispered frustrations about late payments and impossible clients. That's when Madison appeared. All smiles, glossy confidence, and a designer tote that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She'd been introduced as a junior consultant brought in to support our team. Everyone clapped politely, though the energy in the room was unmistakable. We all knew exactly why she was there. She wasn't hired because she was qualified. She was hired because she was the VP's daughter. At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was eager to learn. Maybe she really wanted to prove herself. But within a few days, it was obvious. Madison wasn't here to work, she was here to shine. And she didn't care who she had to step on to do it. It started small. She'd wander over to my desk with that sugary tone people use when they're pretending to be friendly. "Hey, can I see how you formatted those analytics reports?" Just curious. I'd show her, thinking I was helping a new colleague learn. The next day, she'd present my template in a meeting, claiming she came up with a faster system. The VP beamed with pride while I sat there, invisible, wondering if I was overreacting. Then came the whispers. Tiny, poisonous things that spread faster than truth ever could. Someone mentioned that Madison said I'd been rude to her, that I didn't like working with new hires. One afternoon, a coworker quietly warned me that she'd overheard Madison telling a manager that I'd deleted her files by mistake. It was subtle sabotage, crafted perfectly to sound believable. And the worst part? People believed her. Because who were they going to trust? The VP's daughter or me, the woman who kept her head down and just did her job? The breaking point came when I discovered she had replaced my presentation with her own the night before a major client meeting. My slides, my research, my entire month of work, gone. I confronted her privately after the meeting, my voice shaking with a mix of disbelief and anger. "Why would you do that?" I asked. "That was my project." She didn't even flinch. She leaned back in her chair, smiled faintly, and said, "Because I can." Then she stood up, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve, and added, "No one's going to believe you over me. So maybe next time just stay quiet. It's better for your career." That night, I sat in my car long after everyone else had left, staring at the empty parking lot. The humiliation burned, but beneath it, a quiet clarity formed. I realized that people like Madison thrived on others' silence. They counted on it, on the fear, the doubt, the desire to just keep peace. So I decided to stop being silent. The next morning, I requested IT access logs. I asked quietly, politely, the way women often do when they know they'll be dismissed if they sound too direct. I reviewed timestamps, file histories, and even checked the security camera list for the conference room. The data didn't lie, and neither did the footage. It was all there. Madison sneaking in late that evening, plugging in her USB drive, deleting files, laughing into her phone. She thought no one would ever see it. But I saw it, and I kept it. From that moment, I stopped being afraid of her power, or her father's, because the truth doesn't need a title to stand tall. It just needs the right moment to be seen. In the days leading up to the meeting, I moved quietly, pretending everything was normal. Madison strutted around the office like she had already won, tossing her hair, smiling too sweetly at everyone she'd poisoned against me. Her confidence was almost impressive, the way she carried herself as if the truth didn't exist, as if her father's position could erase reality itself. But beneath her arrogance, I noticed something else: carelessness. She had no idea I knew what she'd done. Every time she walked past my desk, every time she bragged about how hard she worked on the project, I bit my tongue and smiled. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I double-checked the footage, copied the files onto 2 drives, and emailed myself backups under a discrete folder name. I knew I had one shot, one moment to show everyone what kind of person she really was. And when that moment came, I needed to be ready. Meanwhile, whispers continued around the office. I heard my name in conversations that went silent the moment I entered the room. Emails got shorter, colder. Meetings felt tense. The VP, who once greeted me with respect, now barely nodded in my direction. It was clear that Madison had gotten to him, twisting every story, painting herself as the victim and me as the jealous coworker trying to bring her down. But what Madison didn't know was that I had already spoken with IT, quietly and carefully. I had asked them to confirm file activity for that specific night. They didn't need to know the whole story, just enough to verify a timestamp. Their report aligned perfectly with the footage. Every piece fit. The night before the meeting, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene I knew would unfold. I'd always been the kind of person who avoided confrontation, who believed hard work would speak for itself. But sometimes silence is mistaken for weakness. Sometimes you have to let truth speak louder than your politeness. The next morning, when the assistant sent the sudden all-staff email, I knew instantly it was her move. Madison must have run crying to her father, spinning another lie. Maybe she thought if she humiliated me in front of everyone, I'd finally break. Maybe she wanted to make an example out of me, a warning to anyone else who dared to question her. I took a deep breath, slipped my phone into my pocket, and walked toward the boardroom. My hands were cold, but my steps were steady. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt ready. When I entered the room, all eyes flicked toward me. Madison sat near her father, whispering something to him with a smug tilt of her lips. She looked like someone who thought she'd already won the war. I sat down quietly, waiting. And when the VP finally turned to me with that cutting demand, "Apologize to my daughter now, or you're fired," something inside me stilled. This was it. The moment she had engineered and the one I had been preparing for. I looked at Madison, really looked at her, and saw the fear flicker behind her bravado. She didn't know I had evidence. She didn't know I had already taken her weapon and turned it into mine. As I reached for my phone, the room around me blurred into silence. My heart was pounding, but not with fear, with certainty. I wasn't just standing up for myself anymore. I was standing up for every woman who had ever been told to stay quiet, to take the blame, to apologize for something she didn't do. The truth was waiting, and I was finally ready to let it speak. I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room follow me. My chair scraped softly against the polished floor, the sound somehow louder in the silence that had swallowed the space. Madison's smirk twitched, just slightly, like she wasn't sure if I was about to apologize or do something she didn't expect. I could see the VP straighten, crossing his arms, his authority like a wall he thought I couldn't climb. "With all due respect, sir," I said, my voice steady but calm. "Before I say anything, I'd like everyone to see something." I walked toward the projector, plugged in my phone, and the screen flickered to life. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the video began. The footage was grainy but clear enough. The timestamp in the corner showed the night before the client meeting, long after everyone else had gone home. There she was, Madison, in the conference room, humming softly, her hair tied up, a USB drive in her hand. She plugged it into my laptop, opened the project folder, and selected every single one of my files. One click, delete. Another click, paste from her drive. Her voice came through faintly on the recording. "Now let's see how she explains this in front of everyone tomorrow," she laughed, holding her phone like she was texting someone. A sharp gasp escaped someone at the table. Then another. A few people turned to look at her, the same ones who had believed her stories, who had smiled at me with polite pity the past few weeks. The air thickened with discomfort. I didn't look at Madison. I didn't need to. I could feel her unraveling beside me, the way her confidence slipped away like sand through shaking fingers. The VP's expression shifted. His jaw tightened and his face lost all color. His daughter's voice echoed again from the speakers, cruel and self-satisfied. "No one's going to believe you over me," she said on the recording. It was almost poetic, hearing her own words condemn her. When the video ended, I didn't say a word. I disconnected my phone and set it gently on the table. For a few seconds, no one moved. Even the clock on the wall seemed to have stopped ticking. Finally, I looked up and said softly, "I'll apologize if that's still what you want." The VP opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His daughter stared at the table, frozen, her face pale and trembling. The silence was unbearable, the kind that weighs on every soul present. Then the CEO, who had been sitting quietly in the corner the entire time, cleared his throat and stood. He was a composed man, known for his calm authority, but now his gaze was cold and sharp as steel. He looked at Madison, then at her father. "Meeting adjourned," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Madison, clear your desk. Effective immediately." Madison's chair screeched back as she stood, her breath catching in her throat. She tried to speak, but the words tumbled uselessly. The VP reached out to her instinctively, but even he couldn't defend what he'd just seen. He sank into his chair, rubbing his temples, avoiding everyone's eyes. I stayed standing, my phone still in my hand, my heart racing but my expression calm. It wasn't triumph I felt, and it was relief. The truth had finally spoken, and I hadn't had to shout to make it heard. As people began to file out, whispers replaced silence. Some looked at me with something like respect, others with guilt. I caught the CEO's eye before he left. He gave me a small nod, the kind that said well done, the kind that meant we saw the truth. I waited until the room was nearly empty before I finally sat back down, letting out the breath I'd been holding for weeks. My hands were trembling, but not from fear anymore, from release. I didn't win by shouting or by begging to be believed. I won by being patient, by letting the truth arrive exactly when it needed to. And as Madison left the room, her confidence shattered and her lies stripped bare, I realized something simple but powerful. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers, and that whisper can shake an empire. That afternoon, the air in the office felt different, lighter somehow, though no one dared say a word about what had happened. Conversations stopped when I passed by. A few coworkers looked up from their screens to give me quiet nods, small gestures of respect or maybe apology. The same people who once avoided eye contact now smiled hesitantly, as if realizing they had stood on the wrong side of the story. HR called me in just after lunch. My stomach fluttered, half with nerves and half with exhaustion. I'd barely eaten, still running on the adrenaline that had carried me through the morning. The HR director, a composed woman with sharp eyes softened by experience, gestured for me to sit. There was no accusation in her tone, no tension in her posture, only calm professionalism. "I wanted to thank you for how you handled yourself," she began, folding her hands neatly on the table. "You could have lost your temper or stormed out or gone straight to social media, but you didn't. You let the facts speak for themselves." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. My throat felt tight, not with fear this time, but with the weight of finally being seen. She continued, "The CEO reviewed everything personally. We all did. The evidence was clear, and frankly, your restraint was admirable." She glanced at the papers in front of her, then looked back at me with a faint smile. "Effective immediately, you're being promoted to senior consultant. You've earned it." For a second, I just sat there, blinking. After everything, the lies, the humiliation, the long nights of doubting myself, those words didn't even sound real. A promotion, not pity. Not damage control. A reward for standing firm in the storm. When I walked out of that office, the sun was shining through the windows, and for the first time in months, I felt it. Really felt it. The warmth, the freedom, the quiet hum of justice settling where chaos used to live. I took a slow breath, clutching the folder they'd handed me, my new contract, my new title. Down the hallway, I caught a glimpse of the VP standing outside his office, talking to the CEO. His shoulders were slumped, his voice subdued. I didn't gloat. I didn't even stop. I just kept walking. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about peace. When I stepped outside, the city felt different too. The noise of traffic, the wind tugging at my hair, the endless rush of people moving forward. It all felt like a reflection of something inside me. A new rhythm, a new beginning. I had always believed that truth mattered, But I learned that truth also needs courage, the kind that comes from being pushed past your breaking point and refusing to shatter. The kind that stands quietly in the middle of a room full of power and says, "No, I won't lie to survive." As I walked toward the train station, my phone buzzed with messages, coworkers, a few friends, even one from someone in the executive team who wrote, "You did the right thing." I smiled faintly but didn't reply right away. I didn't need validation anymore. I had already proven something to myself that no job title or applause could match. Sometimes integrity doesn't make you popular. It makes you free. And, as I boarded the train home, the city lights beginning to shimmer against the evening sky, I realized that this wasn't just an ending. It was proof. Proof that standing for what's right might cost you everything for a moment, but in the end, it gives you back something far greater: yourself. In the weeks that followed, the office slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but something had changed. Not just in how people looked at me, but in how I looked at myself. I no longer walked with my head down or second-guessed my worth. I had faced power, deception, and humiliation, and I hadn't broken. I had let truth do what it does best: stand unshaken, even when everything else trembles. Madison's departure became one of those quiet stories that offices eventually stopped talking about, but the lesson it left behind stayed. People started speaking up more, setting boundaries, holding their heads higher. And as for me, I learned that strength doesn't always come with shouting or fighting. Sometimes it comes with stillness, with the courage to wait for the right moment to show the world who you really are. Every time I stepped into that boardroom after that day, I could still feel the echo of that silence, the moment the truth filled the room and changed everything. It reminded me that integrity is louder than authority, that grace can be sharper than revenge, and that no one, no matter how powerful, can rewrite the truth once it's shown. And as I moved forward, stronger, wiser, unshaken, I carried one thought with me everywhere I went. You don't need to fight to be seen. You just need to stand, hold your ground, and let the truth do the talking.